Now let's take a look at the code that is going to support the basics of displaying data. And let me just remind you that you've seen up here this drop-down list, and I put a little utility function in the file called lib.php that handled the selector. And that's all that I've put into that file. Now I'm going to go back into lib.php and implement the code that will be retrieving data from the database. And I'll give you an overview of the architecture of that file as it will evolve. So in addition to this do-one-selector routine, I am going to have 4 major routines in this file. And actually there's one scrolled out of view up here, so there will be 5 in all. I'll go through them in order, and the first one up here is one that I will use in various places. It's called get from database brief, and if I expand this as well, you can see that what it does, all this is a call to the database to retrieve a given record, a pick. I need the ID of the pick, and then I get the data back from the database. The reason for this architecture is that I am encapsulating the database calls and in their own routines, so that the number of routines in the app that need to know about the database structure, that very, very few of them need to know about the database structure. In the app, I will be able to call get from database brief. All I need is the ID of a pick, and I will get the data back. And here is what I'm getting back in a named array. I don't have to know how the database is structured. That's key to insulating your database from changes in the app and vice versa. So we'll come back and we'll use this as a utility function. The main function here is a function called get from database and render, which takes 2 parameters and 1 optional parameter. The which select says what is it that I want to get from the database. Do I want my picks, my friends' picks, the choices that I have, and you can see them on the tabs up here, and you will see them in other places in the application. So this first parameter, the which parameter, will tell me what type of retrieval I'm getting. Then there is an array, a named array of parameters called params, which I will use to drive the retrieval from the database. And that is the key to using this type of structure, because in pagination, let me come back here and remind you that what I'm doing is in each page of the database that I am retrieving, if I want to go to page number 2, I'm doing a database access now, and I am only retrieving the records for page number 2. So there's one database access, and all that I'm going to do is bring back the records on page 2, and those are the only records that I'm going to format. So I only got records 4, 5, and 6 from the database, and those are the only ones that I formatted. This is a very efficient way of working, and you'll see how it's structured. But in order for that to happen, I'm going to have to call get from database and render with many, many pagination controls, because I may have to be saying I want a specific pick, or I may have to say I want picks 17 through 18, or whatever will work with the pagination. So this is the key function. Get from database and render in turn is going to call the paginate routine, which is the thing that actually splits stuff apart and puts in those controls for first, last, next, and previous. And the paginate routine, then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to render one item. And I have a double level structure here. I have render 1, which renders one item from the database, and then it indeed calls render 1 columns. And what this does is it means that if I have a display that could be in 1 column or in 2 columns or in 3 columns, I come in here, I do the global operations that affect the individual item in render 1, and then I may do extra processing when I'm splitting the data possibly into 1, 2, or 3 columns. So that's the structure. This is the main function that I'm calling, get from database and render. And then I will paginate it and then render each item that I come back, possibly putting them into multiple columns. That's the basic structure of what I'm going to be doing in lib.php. Now, let me just quickly show you in my picks at the bottom of that code, and we'll go through all of this code. Here is the call to get from database and render. I have a similar line of code at the bottom of browse picks. That's the browse tab. I have two choices. We'll come back to what it is, but again, I'm calling get from database and render. The bottom of friends picks, same thing. It's get from database and render. This is the routine that drives all the data retrieval.